In 100 BCE, Caesar was born into a wealthy household as a child of the prestigious Julian family. He received an excellent education, as Roman aristocrats considered their children to be future statesmen and generals. Great importance was placed on their education in subjects like mathematics and law. However, fortune did not favor Caesar. When his family's political rivals gained the upper hand, all of their wealth was confiscated, and many of his relatives were killed. His father also died suddenly, forcing the 16-year-old Caesar to take over as the head of the family. From that point on, his life was filled with action. At a young age, he joined the Roman army in Asia. During his travels to the Aegean Islands, he was kidnapped by pirates. When the pirates demanded a ransom of 20 talents of gold, Caesar boldly insisted they ask for 50 talents instead. After being released, he quickly assembled a fleet, hunted down the pirates, and had them crucified, fulfilling his own promise. By his 20s, news of a slave uprising had reached Rome. The gladiator Spartacus and his followers had started a rebellion. Although it is uncertain whether young Caesar played a direct role in suppressing the uprising, he was serving in the Senate at the time, making it highly likely that he was involved in some capacity. Eventually, the Spartacus rebellion was crushed by Roman generals Crassus and Pompey Magnus, with 6 rebels crucified along the road to Rome, showcasing the empire's ruthless power. During this period, Caesar worked as both a lawyer and a minor official in the Senate. At the time, Rome was a republic. There was no king or tyrant. Philosophers like Cicero and Cato were dedicated to preserving the values of the republic, believing that freedom was sacred. Caesar was soon appointed by the Senate to govern Gaul, marking the beginning of the most critical phase of his life and the first major chapter of our adventure. Gaul, which corresponds to modern-day France and parts of neighboring regions, was a land filled with barbarian warriors and fierce tribes. It was densely populated, and the Gallic people were formidable soldiers. On one side stood these powerful warriors. On the other, the ambitious Roman commander Gaius Julius Caesar, who commanded just 20. troops and was deeply in debt. He knew that unless he exploited Gaul for wealth, he could be erased from Roman history. However, in the Gallic campaign, Caesar would prove himself a military genius. Years later, his name would be mentioned alongside Genghis Khan, Alexander the Great, and Tamerlane. Over 8 years, Caesar fought against 3 million enemy troops, so 1 million were killed, and another 1 million were sold into slavery. He won victory after victory, defeating 300 tribes and burning down 800 cities. One of his most brilliant victories was at the Battle of Alesia, considered one of the most strategically masterful battles in history. At Alesia, Caesar faced a Gallic army of 250, 0 men while commanding only 40, 0 troops. The battlefield stretched across nearly 30 kilometers. To trap the enemy, he constructed 16 kilometers of wooden fortifications around Alesia. Then, he built an additional 18-kilometer outer wall facing outward, ensuring that both the Gallic forces inside and those outside were trapped between his defenses. From the outside, this seemed like a sure defeat, but it was all part of his plan. The Romans transported over 500 tons of rubble and soil by hand and stacked hundreds of thousands of tons of wood. Caesar himself fought in the battles with his sword in hand. In the end, 12 Roman soldiers were killed, while the Gallic losses reached 100. The king of Gaul was captured. In his book Commentaries on the Gallic War, Caesar meticulously detailed these events, though, of course, with a touch of propaganda. His triumphs demonstrated that great victories are won not by numbers, but by strategy. The discipline of Caesar's army would influence modern military structures. In his ranks, disobedience or complaints were met with the ultimate punishment, crucifixion. But an army cannot be ruled by fear alone. Caesar lived among his soldiers, ate what they ate, and secured their loyalty through leadership. His men remained loyal to him until death. Rome's political struggles and the crossing of the Rubicon, Caesar had conquered all of Gaul and even ventured into Britain, but bad news soon reached him. His close friend Pompey Magnus, who was also his son-in-law, suffered a tragic loss. His beloved daughter died during childbirth. Around the same time, Crassus, the man who had crushed the Spartacus rebellion, suffered a catastrophic defeat against the Parthians and was executed by having molten gold poured down his throat. Meanwhile, the Roman Senate grew increasingly uneasy with Caesar's newfound wealth and power from his 8-year campaign in Gaul. Rome's system was built to prevent unchecked power. 2 consuls led the Senate, and their terms rotated yearly to avoid the rise of a single ruler. If a general became too powerful, the Senate could recall them, appoint a replacement. For Romans, the Senate and the Republic were sacred. One of their most important deities was Libertas, the goddess of freedom, the very inspiration for the Statue of Liberty in the United States. The Senate ordered Caesar to return to Rome without his army, or he would face legal consequences that could strip him of his power. He had two choices: enter Rome as a civilian and stand trial, march into Rome with his army in active war. Caesar and his 13th Legion arrived at the Rubicon River, the boundary where military forces were forbidden from crossing. If he took one step forward, he would plunge Rome into civil war. He made his decision. As he crossed the river, he uttered the famous words, "Aliae acta est," the die is cast. The Senate had to decide: fight with their small forces or flee and raise a larger army. Most senators, including Pompey Magnus, abandoned Rome. Caesar entered the capital unchallenged, greeted only by a few loyalists, including his mistress Servilia, who was also the mother of Brutus, the man who would later betray him. Pompey managed to raise an army, but Caesar defeated him decisively. Pompey fled to Egypt, hoping to rebuild his forces. Meanwhile, the Senate's most devoted defenders, including Cato, also raised an army in North Africa. Caesar knew he needed the people's support. He announced a general amnesty, allowing former enemies to return, including Cicero and Brutus. However, Caesar's rising power alarmed many. He had a throne placed in the Senate and greeted senators while sitting a break from tradition. His marriage to Cleopatra outraged Rome, and his mistress Servilia helped his enemies conspire against him. On March 15, 44 BCE, a group of senators invited Caesar to read a petition at the forum, but it was a trap. As he read the fake document, a senator stabbed him. As he cried out, another slashed his throat. Among his attackers was Brutus. Legend says that as he was stabbed 23 times, Caesar saw Brutus and uttered the words, "Et tu, Brute? You too, Brutus?" His murder sparked not peace, but a new civil war. His general Mark Antony and his 17-year-old great-nephew Octavian sought to claim his power. Rome's republic was dead. Octavian would later emerge victorious, take the name Augustus, and become Rome's first emperor. And so, with Caesar's fateful step across the Rubicon, the fall of the Roman Republic had begun. Don't forget to subscribe and like the video.